right, we should be good. Let's see. All right, we are good for live. Welcome to the stream, everybody. We're here to talk about Eternals. We're going to be doing a spoiler chat, a spoiler discussion about it. So if you guys have not seen Eternals, please, and you haven't seen anything about it, please make sure to go get yourself to the theater and watch the movie, and then you can always rewatch this. This will be up for you guys to watch later. We'll try to go for about an hour, and we have Sean here on the channel here, so we'll have him introduce himself, and we'll get right into it. So let's start with that. So let me get you. There we go.
All right. My name is Sean Chandler. My YouTube channel is Sean Chandler Talks About. And as you can see around me, I love to talk about comic book movies, anything really that involves characters in cosplay, punching CGI things in space. I probably thoroughly enjoy it. And actually, as of today, I hit 200,000 subscribers, so I'm in a really good mood today. And but yeah, so much of my favorite movie franchise of all time is the MCU, because I just love this big, gigantic shared universe with all these different franchises coming together. And so I have many, many thoughts on Eternals.
I was actually going to congratulate you. I was going to wait until the stream starts to congratulate you on your 200K. Guys, so for those who don't know, I actually met Sean back when, how much subscribers did you? I probably had like maybe 5,000. You probably had like what, around where I'm at right now? Maybe like 20, 30 or 50K, somewhere around there?
So I was right around the same size. We were kind of both under that 10,000 whenever we first met.
Yeah, and he was doing Masters of Movie Trivia. So I met him. I met Ryan O'Toole. You guys might know Ryan O'Toole. I met Al, and through them. And
I met Al in person just about a month back.
He was really cool. He was telling me about that, yeah, in down there by you. So Sean and I go back.
I think that's cool how many people we met 5 years ago, and we're still doing this, still having fun, still talking movies. It's cool that how time passes, and with technology we can make friends all over the country, all over the world, brought together by movies, talking about the MCU and all that stuff. That's just really cool. Like, even the fact that, like, you brought up Al, I literally met him a month ago because one of our different friends, Rudy, did a screening of Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League in San Antonio. So I drove up to San Antonio. Al flew out there. So it was like 3 different people from 3 different cities, brought together by YouTube and a love of movies and nerdy stuff. And friendships are actually made through it. That's really cool.
Man, it's so many great people I met from that time too, like Durbin and who else? Rachel, like lots of different people. So yeah, it's really cool. Man, look, it's good to see how far you've come, especially since then. And I know you've been working extremely hard. So 200K, I'm definitely happy for you. And I'm happy, man. On to 300, dude. You've been doing your thing. You've been killing it. So yeah, man, definitely, guys, go check out Sean if you haven't already. Be sure his link to his channel is down below. Get him to help him get the 300K. Yeah, man, definitely enjoy it. So we'll start with you. What are your overall thoughts on the Eternals? I remember we had a brief discussion, and forgive me, guys, if something went into my eye at horrible timing. But I know we had different thoughts on it. We talked a little bit over on Facebook about it. So I'm like, no, I definitely got to get Sean on here to talk about it. So what are your overall thoughts on the Eternals?
So, point of reference, I went in as someone that hasn't read any of the Eternals comics. It's kind of one of the branches of Marvel that I know very little about, whereas most of these characters I either have a lot of knowledge or at least some sort of working knowledge. Eternals, I didn't know much. And so I was kind of excited about that because it was kind of this fresh new world to explore. And it kind of reminded me of when MCU took a risk on Guardians of the Galaxy back 7 years ago and took these characters that weren't A-listers, and I just loved that movie. I want the MCU to take more risks, and so I went into this one not really knowing much, not really sure what to expect, and appreciating that they were taking a risk. Unfortunately for me, this risk didn't pay off. I would kind of fall into the category of people that watched it and I thought, man, I think that would have been so much better as a Disney Plus show, where there's a little bit more time to explore each of the characters, spend more time developing their arcs, the backstory, and with such a story with such large scope, covering so much time with so many characters, I think trying to put that all in one movie was just kind of too much. And so when you got 10 characters, 10 character arcs, 10 backstories, 10 worldviews, plus kind of a bunch of different ideas and game-changing type revelations about the MCU, when you're trying to do all of that in one movie, it felt like some of them were underdeveloped, some of them were cut off halfway through it, some of it was microwaved rather than slow cooked properly. And so because it tried so much, for me, it kind of crumbled under the weight of everything. And so I've seen it twice, and I don't think I even liked it. I respected it. I respected what they were trying to do, but I didn't enjoy the experience of watching it. Like scenes I could enjoy, characters I could enjoy moments of it, but the overall experience I was like, man, it's the MCU. I only want to love MCU films, and I was like, man, I don't think I do. I'm not sure if I like this. So that's kind of my take on it. And I think there's potential in there. It's not like I went in wanting to hate it. It's not like anything like that. It just didn't come together for me as a whole.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely 1000% respect that. I mean, the main thing for me, and I'll ask you this, since you are, I asked another one of my friends who, they're also Rotten Tomatoes certified. So as someone who has been involved with Rotten Tomatoes and has an active input on there, do you agree with the current critic score for Eternals?
Well, I think if you have to preference, kind of understand the limitations of what Rotten Tomatoes does, which is it's a binary. When you put in your score, you write your little blurb, but the actual percentage is based off of either thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you recommend it or do you not? Did it work for you or did it not? And there's nothing in the middle. There's no nuance. And that's where it gets tricky, because you have a movie like this that some people love this movie. There's no shortage of people. They have this as their number one, their number three, top tier MCU. They are loving what this movie did and the mythology and the representation. They love it. And then there's a bunch of other people that was like, I respect that you tried to do all this stuff, but it didn't work. So I unfortunately, I can't recommend it. And so I understand why the score is where it's at because of the nature of the system. But if you contrast it with like Thor: The Dark World, nobody loves that movie. Nobody says it's top tier. So it's kind of like Eternals is lower, but it means something totally different because and I think if Thor: The Dark World came out now, it probably wouldn't score. If people reevaluated it now, it wouldn't score as well as it did when it first came out. But I think you look at Thor: The Dark World, literally, you will not find anybody that says that's their favorite MC film. You will find very few people that say it's top tier. Everyone agrees it's in the bottom half. Most people say it's bottom tier. And so it's not polarizing. It's just a very mediocre film that everybody puts down here. Whereas Eternals, it does this. And then its Rotten Tomatoes score, it's right around that 50%, which actually kind of represents the people's reactions to it more accurately than the Thor: The Dark World score. Thor: The Dark World, I look at that one and go, that doesn't really represent anything. That just says that it's a mediocre movie that's in focus with movie stars that are charismatic and the shots have professional special effects. But they just didn't know where to score it. With Eternals, people are actually split on it, and I think you see that in the score. So it's tough to like. Because of the nature of the score, I understand where it's at and why it's there. But I think the other one that I think is to contrast or compare within the genre would be more like Man of Steel. I love Man of Steel.
That's a perfect example. Yeah.
And it's like 55%. Like I would say that's one of my favorite DC films. I put it way up here, but it's like 55%. And it's because it's polarizing. A bunch of people watched it and they went, this isn't Superman. This isn't what you're supposed to do with this character that's supposed to be around. He's brooding. And so then they couldn't recommend it. Mm-hmm. But I love that film. And a lot of other people love that film. I think that's a better point of reference for what we're seeing with the Eternal score rather than Thor: The Dark World, which nobody loves.
Yeah, and I actually do appreciate you explaining that. So I know you explained it briefly to me over on Facebook, but I do appreciate you explaining it to all the other viewers here about the system, how it actually really works, because that was something that was a little bit more of a confusing thing for me was, I'm working towards that goal to getting on that platform to be able to voice my opinion. So there's still so many things I'm learning about it and how it works. So the voting system to me doesn't really sound as specific as it should.
It's not as nuanced. It answers a good question. It effectively answers the question: what percentage of critics recommend this film? And because it's binary, because it's simplistic, it gives you a percentage, clear metric answer to that question, but it's not a nuanced answer whatsoever. And it rewards movies that are designed for very broad appeal, that don't take big risks, they're safe. And so then you have some of these MCU movies like Ant-Man and the Wasp that's not remotely swinging for the fences. Like Eternal swings for the fences. It tries to tackle big ideas, do interesting things, and that's why people love it. Where Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's like very safe MCU film. But it's like 87% because it's totally safe and didn't alienate people. That's a flaw in the system, that nuance isn't really factored in. And so the 87% doesn't represent how much people liked it, how much they recommend it. They're just like, yeah, it's good enough. Okay, yeah. That's the same thing as if someone is like, I loved it for Eternals. It's the same thumbs up. So it's that lack of nuance that I think makes the Rotten Tomatoes score something that gets misinterpreted a lot because it doesn't mean what some people think it means.
Okay, so I do have another question for you. I did ask this to some others. So I was on another live stream. Actually, Al did a stream last night with the Eternals. So I was on that stream and I asked this question. So I'll ask you this. But before I do that, I'll actually say my perspective on Eternals. So going into Eternals, I'm on the opposite end where I read like as much as I possibly could about the characters before going into this film. I read the Jack Kirby run, I read the Neil Gaiman run, and I absolutely fell in love with the complexity of these characters and, you know, their entire system and their entire construction, how they're written, everything from the deviants to the Eternals themselves and also the humans as well, and just tackling everything between that and the connection with the Celestials. So as a comic book fan and as someone who loved let me restructure that. So as someone who is a fan of the Eternals comics, going into this, I was like, okay, I was able to spot certain things and certain references to the books. And I feel like personally that enhanced my experience. And I don't think this is a perfect film. I'm a Chloe Zhao fan, and I love her cinematography style. I love the way how she shoots things. I love it on a technical level. So for me, I immediately said, this is a Chloe Zhao film from the way that it was filmed, especially cinematography. I love the fact that she used natural lighting for pretty much all of the shots. So that was something that really stood out to me. But yeah, no, just picking apart some of the comic book references. I remember at the end with the end credit scene, I was the only one laughing. I was the only one laughing just because I was super excited for catching on to certain things. So for me, leaving that experience, I was like, yeah, I give this movie like a decent 7 out of 10. I loved it. I thought it was great. I loved the music. I loved the characters. I loved seeing Chloe's angle on them from what I knew from the comic books. I had something to compare it to. So that was how I left feeling. And seeing it again today, I just got out of it about an hour ago. I loved it even more. I just loved everything more about it, and I loved how complex it was. So the question I have for you, which I asked everyone else, was: do you feel that the lack of knowledge, I wouldn't say lack of knowledge, do you think that they did too much with characters that were unknown? Do you think people were just a little too too comfortable with the current Marvel formula?
I don't think it's I think it's the first one. I think most people are kind of like, yeah, I want them to experiment a little bit. I want them to try something different. We've kind of gotten, phases 1 through 3 really kind of did this one specific thing quite a bit. They're ready for something different. And they've taken characters like Guardians of the Galaxy and made them A-listers. So we know the MCU can do that. But I think it is kind of what you mentioned there of trying to do too much with just one movie. And so I think whether you made it a Disney Plus show, whether you...
I'm sorry, I'll be right back. Is it all right? What was it? Okay. Sorry about that, guys. My fire alarm went off. She's doing some cooking. Okay. Continue. Sorry about that.
But whether if you made it did all 10 characters, but as a Disney Plus show that just was able to be 6-7 hours long And with each of these characters, they get an episode. And so you get their worldview, their character arc, and their backstory for 40 minutes for each of the characters. Or whether it was do this movie, but it's like 5 Eternals. I think some sort of different mix, because for me, even some of the characters, and some of the things I said in my reviews, I got comments were like, well, actually in the comics this is what's going on. And actually in the comics it's this. And they said things and I went, well, that would have been great information to have in the movie. And there's also just kind of so many ideas introduced, whether for the MCU mechanics, the nature of the Eternals, so many worldviews, so many kind of philosophical ideas being introduced. It's just so much to absorb, and you're not able to resolve all of them in even a long movie's runtime. And so I think there's just that at the core of so many issues. I was like, well, why didn't they develop this? Why didn't I learn more about this character? Why didn't they say this? Why was all of this just told to me rather than shown? Because there's too much in there, and so it was either underdeveloped or microwaved and rushed.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, so what I'm hearing basically, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a little bit too much information about certain things that they could have maybe replaced with more important information about the characters.
I think if you're trying to, so like if you have 10 characters. And one of the ideas that, it's just an idea that if you wrote it going into this movie, let's write on the whiteboard, what's some great things to do with this film? What if each of the Eternals represented a different worldview and perspective on mankind?
Okay.
And then because of their power set, they have a different struggle in light of their mission. So Druig, he has the ability, every time he sees 2 humans about to kill each other, to save a life. But he's been told not to do that. That's interesting. And then you have Icarus, the true believer in their mission. And so all 10 of them kind of represent a very different worldview. But to flesh out a worldview and have a character arc for it just takes time. And so if you have all these philosophical questions, like Druig, is it wrong to control people? Is it better to give people free will? Or is it better to take away free will, but give them peace and prosperity and harmony? All of the characters represent a worldview, a philosophical question, a character arc, a backstory. And so it's just so much in that. The inventor, Fastos.
Fastos.
So they bring him in, and they have a point in time where he's in Japan right after the atomic bombs, and he's just sitting there broken heart, like about how his actions led to this moment. And then he follows it up with, our mission was a failure, they're not worth saving, which is a totally different perspective. And then it's followed immediately by he's married and has a kid. And he went from, I've given up to mankind, to doing the most personal thing you can do, which is get married and raise a child, fall in love, like so human versus, and I go like, think if that had been an episode of a Disney Plus show where you see the moment where he meets his husband and he has given up, and then he meets someone that reminds him of the good in mankind. And then you see this journey from they're not worth saving to, of course I have to go save the planet. There's so much meat in that, but because we have to introduce 10 different characters and play catch up, it went from I've given up on mankind, I did this, they're not worth saving, oh, I'm married, but I'm not going to go save them, to, okay, his husband says go and you should go, and he goes, okay, I'm going to go, and it's all in 5 minutes. So I think that's probably the best example of like what was my frustration, because if we just sit here and talk about his character arc, his worldview, it's really interesting.
So that's interesting, because I was going to ask you that exact question. I was going to ask you exactly what was the main issue for you, and yeah, I think you just pretty much explained that. And I can actually see where you're coming from, because there were some very interesting stories, especially
Yeah.
especially between the relationship that was being set up between Makari and Druig, and there's
Mm-hmm.
so many different stories that they can go along. So I definitely understand that point of view and the frustration of wanting to have more or feeling like it was a tease for something that could have been done better or written better. So I do get that, but it's interesting because I didn't walk out having any of those complaints at all. So
Yeah.
it's actually really interesting to hear that perspective
Right.
on that, because I walked out feeling that I got enough of that
Mm-hmm.
to want more from maybe an Eternals 2, or maybe if
Mm-hmm.
they do a spin-off series with Makari and Druig, or even Fastos, or anything like that.
Right.
So I mean, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that perspective coming out of it. So I can see why one would be upset about that. So, or at
What?
least frustrated.
And it's also kind of like, so I saw it the first time, I think 2.5 weeks ago, saw it a second time a week ago, and did a spoiler review about it. Have had many conversations on Facebook, like with you, and then texting with people, and then on Twitter. And then even just as I was writing my notes for my video I'm doing tomorrow where I'm talking about the characters, and I had my wife come in and like, all right, what do you think about these? And we were having these conversations, and like I'm piecing together like, what was it that didn't work? Why was it? And it was like, as I talked about the individual characters, all of them represented something that was really interesting and had a depth to it. But I didn't experience that watching the movie. I had the thought 2 weeks later, talking with my wife about like, if I really unpack this, wow, that's really great. But as I was watching, I just didn't feel any of it because there was so much stuff going on. And I think that's so much of why the divide seems to be so great between people. Of one group of people, they see all this stuff and they go, that was so cool. And there's so much humanity in that. Well, this is an interesting idea. And the other half is like, there's so much going on. I'm not connecting with all of it, or I'm not pulling it all together into a cohesive whole.
So for me, so one of the things that I that came to my thoughts last night when I was thinking about things to talk about for this live stream, and I mentioned it in Al's live stream last night, was how personal Chloe Zhao is when it comes to her filmmaking, and how good she is at really exploring characters and making you really feel things for them. So I don't know how you felt about Nomadland. Did you enjoy Nomadland? Did you not like it? Did you think it was just briefly?
It was a movie that I respected more than I thoroughly enjoyed. It's like
Okay,
I
that's
watched
fine.
it, I was like, yeah, I think I can see why a lot of other people are loving this, and I like, wow, this is beautiful and this shot, and we're really diving into this character. It's not the sort of movie that I would naturally go and re-explore myself. When I
Okay.
I wouldn't at all say it's bad. I wouldn't at all say like, man, well, what was this? It wasn't that. It was just like watching. It was like, this is. I'm wired a little bit more for I'm a big spectacle kind of person, and so just kind of the pacing of it, the nature of it, wasn't the sort of thing I naturally gravitate towards.
So you're not really more into slower movies?
Not the kind of not the nature of this one.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
And
That's fair.
I think there was even kind of the it. I tend to be wanting things that are a little bit more literal and direct. I want to know
Okay.
exactly what the takeaway is, and so then kind of she tells a scripted story in a very kind of documentary style, and so then it's more like a picture of life that doesn't clearly exactly say what it's trying to say about kind of all these themes about the workforce, retirement, these different groups of people. And so then I left it, it was like, okay, like I've got a bunch of things running through my head. It did its job in that sense, but I don't know where I was supposed to land on some of these things.
I think you're actually describing her style perfectly, because that's exactly what she did with Eternals. And I feel like if we really gave her the chance to do what she would have maybe wanted to do, because at the end of the day, you had Kevin Feige executive producing. There's an end goal to this. There's an end, there's an entire plan that has to fit in with the rest of the movie somehow. So you can see in moments where she would be very in her element, and then 2 seconds later, something happens. You're like, okay, that's definitely a Kevin Feige thing. A humor comes in. This happens. So I can definitely see where the conflict would come, where that is concerned, just because that's where she excels. She excels at it, at telling stories where she might give you a little bit of something and you have to kind of fill in the blank. And oddly enough, I enjoyed that. I think that's one of the things I loved about it. I love questioning things, and I love saying, man, what is this? And what's happening with this? Because even on my second rewatch, there were certain things that I noticed that I didn't notice the first time with it, where I was like, man, I really love that she did that instead. So before we move on to this, just shout out to Cody Leach. I appreciate the $5 super chat. Cody, it's been a minute. He said they should have put Blade in the love scene with his son. Hey, look, the Blade thing at the end. Did you realize that it was Blade at the end? By the way, the first time you watched?
No, that was after watching the movie a thing that really frustrated me because I love Blade. I saw all three of them in the theater when they first came out. So excited when they announced that they're doing a new one, and so for me that they did a scene that was paying off the ambiguity of what was going on with Dane's character, and then tying together a few things that were referenced as with the Eternals, with Excalibur, and you're like, oh, what's kind of going on here? And then you hear a voice, and they didn't do anything to tease daywalkers, vampires, anything that would cue my brain to be thinking about that, and just kind of relied on my ability to recognize Mahershala Ali's voice without doing anything to cue my brain to recognize it. And so I watched it in the theater the first time. I was like, okay, whatever. And I had someone say, oh, was that Doctor Strange's voice? Like, I don't think that was Doctor Strange's voice. And I heard some other people suggesting all these different names. Like, it was all over the place, the names I was kind of hearing. And then as I was leaving the theater the second time I saw it, I heard the name Blade mentioned. I was like, that'd be kind of interesting, but why would you make it so vague as your debut for Blade? If they did that same exact scene, but he delivers his line, and it's him in the shadows, and he's got sunglasses, but you just see a pointy tooth. You don't have to have the costume right, but it's clearly, that's Blade. I'm going to lose my mind in the theater, but when you do it in a way where I hear the voice, I was like, okay, I don't know who that was.
Maybe they wanted people to go back the second time, because there was a guy that I left that was leaving the theater with me, and he was like, I only came back just to hear Blade's voice.
Yeah, and it's just kind of one of those strategies. Maybe it would have played differently if I hadn't seen it at a press screening first and then a fan screening, and if you're in the theater with the actual opening night crowd, it probably plays different. You have the experience it different. But for me, as someone so excited to see Blade, hearing the voice a week and a half before I learned it was Blade, it made me I would have loved to have in the theater lose my mind. But instead, I'm on Twitter wait, that was Blade? I missed it? Oh, no!
So the press screening thing is actually a pretty good point. So the couple that I've been to, so this is my experience for it. And I realized this with Dune, just because Dune is probably one of my favorite movies of this year. But when I went there, it was just a press crowd, critic crowd. We're all just sitting there. And as you know, everyone's there to enjoy the movie, listen to it, really take it in so that they can critique it properly later on. So there's not a lot of fanboying going around, at least in my experience, not a lot of fanboying going around and stuff. People are very quiet and they listen to things. So the experience at a press screening is so different. And then coming to watch Eternals, there's laughs and there's just the general excitement that you get in a superhero crowd, or just crowds, just regular, audience members just going to watch the movie with their friends and family. So the vibe, I would have to agree with you. It's a little different. And the perspective is a little different. That's why I love seeing it again the second time. But there is something that I wanted to... Yeah, no, go ahead.
Very frequently, I very intentionally, even if I saw it at the press screening, I want to see these MCU movies, go see it opening night with the opening night crowd. So the real audience, it's a different experience. So I didn't actually go opening night for this one because I was at a fan screening the night before. So it was with fans, but I was press invited. Totally different experience. Press screening, I had a row to myself. And then at the fan screening, fully packed theater. And I mean, when they did that, when Harry Styles walked out, the girl next to me at the press screening was oh yeah, people kind of chuckles.
Yeah.
The girl next to me at the fan screening, just shouting and screaming whoa, what's going on here? But my fan screen actually was a pretty bad audience, so there was a lot of talking throughout the movie and stuff. It was frustrating because it was like it was tough to read because it was every good and bad thing you could imagine. People talking throughout it. They were cheering, they were laughing, but then like at the end of the movie where Icarus is about to laser eye Circe, and then he has a change of heart. And he's like, and, crying. He has his emotional response. People started like laughing. Like,
really,
dude, what are you guys doing? But then when the credits roll, they're like, yeah, clapping. So it's like, I have no idea what you guys experienced. I have no idea. Like, I don't have a good vibe for this. All I know, it was amped up way too. You guys had too much energy. Every thought you had, just said it. Every emotion you felt, every immature emotion you felt, and every like a proper. It was really tough to read what was happening. But what I do know, that girl next to me, massive One Direction fan.
Oh, dude, there was I was saying this. There's definitely a pro and a con too. And shout out to Eric's Reloaded. I saw him step in here for a little bit to say hi. Welcome, man. Nice to see you. Yeah, no. So yeah, there's definitely a different. There's a pro and a con to press screenings and audience screenings, because I know for Dune, I did not want to be around people who weren't ready for it. I wanted to be around. I wanted to be around serious people who were really there to watch Denis' masterpiece in a full IMAX screen and just there to take it in. So I did not want to experience that with a bunch of people trying to kiss their girlfriends behind me. Like, I did not need that. So so there's definitely definitely a bit of a difference. But it's interesting sitting down and just listening to everyone's like reactions to certain things. Like both times that I went, the audience was laughing. They absolutely loved it. They were, at least for my experience, they were, for the most part, everyone just seemed to love it. And even at the set today, there was just one row full of like maybe what I can tell they're maybe like 20 years old, like 6 girls. You can tell that they were there for Harry Styles. The minute he showed up, they stood up just like he's screaming and clapping. And then as soon as the movie was done, they left. And I was laughing so hard just because you can tell they were there for that. But but yeah, no. To one of the questions I did see, which was going to lead me to one of the things I'm going to talk about, was someone mentioned that there was too many Eternals. I would say just from the comic book perspective, there were not even close to enough Eternals, because there's like 100 plus in the comic books, so many different Eternals. Using 10, I feel like Chloe had a tough challenge in terms of, you know, I said this in Al's stream last night. Leading up to the Avengers, we had solo films, we had Thor, we had Iron Man, so we had different movies to develop them. So by the time it came to Avengers, we were ready for it. We were prepared for seeing, you know, all of them on screen. This one, you had no one who knew anything about them, and then you had to come straight into it and have 10. So I feel like she had a tough
and it
challenge.
had this whole other world building.
Yeah,
like even if you do the regular Avengers, if they exist kind of on that normal plane of human existence, you don't need the world building for it. Whereas with the Eternals, it's the characters have to be introduced, and this whole other understanding of the universe of the MCU. That's just like a lot to take in.
Okay. So I see. Okay, so we talked a little bit before about some notes that you were taking. So I want to hear what some of the stuff you wrote down for your pros and cons. I'm definitely so we heard some of your cons a little bit. Some I can agree with, some I don't necessarily see it, just because I for some reason my perspective on it, which is why I wanted to have you here.
Yeah,
I did not even see that perspective at all. Period. Just because I walked out just like.
Well, even kind of the conversation that started us talking on Facebook was, I made a comment. I was like, hey, man, I understand why people would like this movie. I'm confused by people that have it top tier. And that's what's interesting. It's like such radically different perspectives of like people look at this movie, and it was like a Rorschach test. You look at it and you see something totally different. And there's so much in there to unpack.
As of right now, I actually do have it in my top 10 as of right now. Simply, so I said this in my spoiler review. So for those who haven't seen my spoiler reviews, I'll just give my brief thoughts on just this thing. Overall, loved Eternals. Absolutely loved it. I will watch it again. I was concerned that it wouldn't have a lot of rewatchability with it, just because I'm like, okay, this is a very slow pace kind of movie. can you rewatch this if you're doing an MCU binge again and you're rewatching, especially they're doing this IMAX enhanced thing this Friday. Everyone's going to be rewatching it on Disney Plus. So I did question that, but I had no qualms about it going into it the second time. So going into it, I remember looking for negatives the first time, just because I've been seeing critic reviews. I've been looking for negatives. I'm like, okay, can I see what people were so enraged about? Mainly just because I have seen a lot of complaints from some critics saying, you know, that had issues with, you know, the representation factors. I won't get too much into that because I talked about it last night, but there was some people that had problems with that, and that affected their experience. So because of that, they rated it as not recommended. So for me, leaving this, I'm just like, okay, this is great. And every single, you know, why I have it up there, just to get it back to the top 10, was I felt, in terms of really getting into certain characters on a very deep emotional level and drama that we haven't seen before in the MCU. We've just come in, throw a couple jokes, have a tragic backstory, and then we move on. These are people who are trying to find their place in the universe, their whole purpose, and exploring that. So I feel like this was Marvel's way of dipping their toes into that realm, some of the darker stuff that you might see with a Zack Snyder film. And I know Chloe Zhao is a fan of Zack, and she kind of looks at him as a cinematic author. So, you know, for me, that's why it's up there, just because I felt the depth and the characters were enough for me to say, okay, this is something new that Marvel hasn't done before, and I like the direction. But yeah.
Yeah, it's what's
Trying to see, there was a comment here from Zach Pope. Welcome to the stream, man. Welcome to the stream. Someone said it's not top tier. So what are your why wouldn't you say it's not top tier?
Well, so for me, here's kind of the way I would to do a comparison that actually. So in my original version of my spoiler review, I actually filmed a section about contrasting, like, why did I like Venom, Let There Be Carnage, but didn't like Eternals. And
okay, I gotta hear this one, Sean. You gotta explain this.
And then I cut it. I cut it out because I was like, I don't need to explain things like this. But I think it does kind of, it fits kind of what I think kind of happens here. So for me, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, it's this movie that has no pretenses. It just wants to put a smile on your face with stupid entertainment. And for me, I had fun with it, and it entertained me with its stupid antics. It has story problems. Like I would say, Eternals has story problems, but at the end of the day, it did what it was supposed to do, put a smile on my face. Eternals did have these pretenses of being more and tackling bigger ideas and having all these big character arcs, big philosophical questions being explored while doing big action, doing the MCU humor. And while it's trying to do all of that, none of it fully came together for me. And so, to do an analogy, it's kind of like Venom, Let There Be Carnage. He's like the last guy in the lineup of your baseball team. You don't expect him to even get on base. He struck out the last 2 times. He gets up. Hey, he swings it and misses a couple of times. But at the end of the day, he got on base. I didn't expect much, but he got on base. Eternals he's your home run hitter. And Eternals walks out. Chloe, I'm getting my analogy confused. Chloe walks out. She calls her shot. She's going to hit it over the center field fence. Ball's thrown. It's a fastball, and it's a beautiful swing. Makes great contact. Running gracefully around the bases, but at the end of the day, got out. They caught the ball. They didn't actually get on base.
Okay.
That's kind of my perspective. Like, there's so many things you can say, like, that was a beautiful swing. That was such confidence. That's the best batter. But at the end of the day, for me, it just didn't work. It didn't come together. And it's like much more trying to be prestige. It's a much better looking film. It's tackling much more interesting questions than Let There Be Venom. But it didn't accomplish what it was trying to do. It was trying to juggle a bunch of chainsaws, which is impressive, but it didn't end up juggling them, whereas Let Them Be Carnage is just trying to juggle scarves. Pretty easy to do, but it kind of did it for me. That's the kind of the idea.
Okay, so I hear where you're coming from. I'll put it this way. Man, every time I have a thought to add to what you're saying, I just see a comment that just throws me. I just see a comment that's just like, oh my god, like the point I was trying to make. Oh man. So I'm back now. I got it. So.
Okay.
I remember maybe about a month ago before the film was released. I was a very harsh. So I'm a huge fan of Denis Villeneuve's movies. I love his movies, but I didn't like some of the things he was saying about streaming versus being in the theaters, yada yada yada. So I remember him making comments saying that all Marvel movies are copy and paste and they're cookie cutter. I don't know the exact quote that he says. So I don't take me verbatim, guys, but. He said something along those lines, and I was like, "What are you talking about, Denis? Like, what are you talking about?" And now that after I saw Eternals, I'm like, Denis, I see what you're saying. This movie was so different than Shang-Chi. It was so different than all some of the ones that we've seen within the last few Marvel movies, and I'm like, I really dig it. And because he was supporting Chloe, he was like, okay, I want her. I'm actually glad they got her on here. I'm glad they got her to do this. So, what I'm hearing. If it correct me, Sean, what I'm hearing is that it didn't feel MCU enough. Am I wrong? Am I wrong there, or am I a little off?
I don't think that's what I would say it is. It's a little bit difficult to know because you do go into an MCU film with a certain set of expectations, and so the movie, is a bit of a deconstruction of heroes where you have these eternal heroes. All of them processing their mission and their purpose and their existence in different ways. And so it's kind of a deconstruction of superheroes, whereas most MCU films are more straightforward. That's a bad guy. This is a good guy. The good guy just has to embrace their mission as the hero to stop the bad guy. And so I think there's certain things like that could potentially make it a film that's can be difficult to process the first time, but I don't think I would phrase it as it was too different. I don't think that's what my issue was, especially because I watched it the second time with different expectations and let's go and okay, I've heard some different perspectives from people that liked it. I've tried to read a few things to go into see it differently.
Yeah,
and I just think for me it tried to do so many things that everything was half cooked or microwaved.
So would you ever watch it again?
Would I ever watch it again? I mean, sure, because I do this. It's one that I think I would struggle a little bit more to rewatch it. Okay. And I think it's also kind of a bit of I think where it's a bit of an unfair statement though, because I think Thor: The Dark World is a very mediocre film, but that's almost why it's pretty easy to rewatch because it doesn't challenge you. Doesn't demand anything of you. So it's like, yeah, Chris Hemsworth doing his thing with Loki, but it doesn't demand anything, but it's not that good. Whereas this is a movie that it's a much bigger investment that takes more out of you to watch it, process everything kind of coming at you. But, but at the moment, I would think if I rewatch the MCU movies every year. Yeah. That a new movie comes out. So I didn't rewatch all of them last year because new movies didn't come out. But because I talk about them on my channel, I rewatch them every year. So of course I'm going to rewatch this movie potentially even before December to give it really before I give my final ranking of the year. Try and see okay, let me hear every great thing about it and see the movie that others are seeing to try and balance myself. But as for just my desire, it's not one that I'm like, man, I can't wait to watch that again to explore everybody.
So, all right. So for me, I know for me, whenever I try to review a movie, my style of reviewing is I think it's a little different than a lot of people. I try to mix in a little bit of personal opinion here and there, but for the most part, I try to be objective as I can and try to see things just from perspective. So like Spencer, I wasn't able to grab a screener for that one, so I'm going to see that in a couple days and do a review for that. Some of the things I've already heard, I already know that a lot of people won't like Spencer, just because it's not that type of movie that everyone can sit down and enjoy. I know I most likely will like it for my own personal reasons because I just love her, her story and the things things she went through is very fascinating and it's really shocking. So for me, I'll enjoy that. So what I'm really trying to get to with this is there are things that came with this movie, in my opinion, that was really good in terms of representation and where we can see the MCU films going forward. And another joke some people have been throwing around is like Chloe Zhao showed Marvel how to save some money by not using too much lighting in the movie, so they can save some money going forward. So, but I mean, overall, I do feel like a lot of good came out of this movie. A lot of good came from it, and will go on into the future. But as a film and reviewing it as a movie, do you think you can recommend this movie outside of your own personal opinions? Do you think that you can recommend this movie to everyone just as a film?
I think my issues with it are kind of story issues, but at the same time, the way I would say it is, I did not like this film, or I didn't enjoy it as of my 2 times watching it. But it's the type of film where I don't know where you will land.
Okay.
Everyone's falling differently on the film. And so I think like my statement would be, if you're an MCU fan, of course you should go see this. Or if you are interested in comic book movies but a little bit tired of the same old, you should go see this movie. And you should make up your mind for yourself. To continue going back to the Thor: The Dark World comparison, Thor: The Dark World is not an interesting film. It's just a bland blockbuster.
It's really not.
Whereas this is a movie that is interesting, and it makes you think, and people are responding wildly differently to it because there's so much in there. In and of itself, I think that's one thing that film is supposed to do. And I'll say this too. I've said this a couple times in here that I want the MCU to take more risks, and this risk didn't pay off for me. But it didn't make me go, well, I want MCU to be safer now. It didn't do that at all. I'm still entirely like, yeah, MCU, take more risks. Now, if you do 5 risks if you do 3 risks in a row that don't work, well, let's rethink things a little bit. But even though this risk didn't pay off for me, I still love that they allowed her to do something very different, that's very personal, that has representation, that does a bunch of different things for a bunch of different people. And it didn't all come together for me, but it did for a lot of people. And in the same way that I love Man of Steel and a bunch of people don't, but I also love that Zack Snyder makes spicy films, that not everybody likes spicy food. My wife, if it has anything beyond mild, actually, if she has mild sauce, she might be like, this is kind of hot. She doesn't eat anything spicy. For me, if it's not spicy, it doesn't have flavor to it. And so that's what Zack Snyder films are, and that's what this is. And that's a good thing. It wasn't my brand of spice. It wasn't the thing that I like. But a lot of people really resonate with it. A lot of people really love what it is, and that's a good thing.
So I mean, I feel like most of what you're saying, honestly, like I respect everything you're saying, just because I hear your points. You actually have reasonings behind what you're saying, and I can see why that might be something that wasn't good for you. So, but what was the issue for me, which is what made me, I need to talk about this, was just again, I'm not trying to. I have some people call me. They thought I was trying to start a war with the critic community. I'm not, but I promise you. But I do have issues when I see a review, or I speak to people, which I won't name, who are also Rotten Tomatoes certified, who say, I didn't like this movie because they had a gay man, and it had this, and that's why I didn't like it. And that's when I have an issue with that. And I feel like a lot of people, again, I don't really have a lot of evidence to support what I'm about to say, but I hope that wasn't the reason why people were a little turned off by it. So I've been seeing a lot of those comments around the place, and I only bring it up because it is an important conversation to be had concerning the film, because that is, especially if you spend enough time on Twitter, there's all kinds of people on Twitter. There's people who are just keyboard warriors, and you have people who are just genuinely expressing themselves. And you see the main thing that comes up with this is that people were not happy about Fastos and that scene. And that seemed to be the main conversation piece about the film, and not actually the film itself or the story or the script or any of that, or the pacing or the editing, which if I were to say negatives, I did have some slight issues with the editing and some of the pacing in between of the film. Like on a technical level, I had some technical issues. But a lot of the issues that people seem to have was that piece in there. So I feel like that's where I would have problems with that, and that's why I wanted to speak with you, because I know you would have some sound opinions on the film.
It's tough to say. Like I wouldn't perceive of specifically the Rotten Tomatoes critics as a group,
of course,
being the people that would be inclined in that direction. We all know the YouTube channels that make their living off kind of outrage and taking kind of issues. Like we all kind of know who those channels are and who those personalities are. But like you think the Rotten Tomatoes critic, like this is the group that 2 months ago gave Shang-Chi like 94%. Black Panther's the highest rated MCU film on Rotten Tomatoes. So I think generally speaking, and there was a guy from Variety that there was a quote that kind of went viral on Twitter where he said the reason people are being harsh on this movie is because a woman directed it, and a lot of us kind of took issue with that because it's like we gave positive reviews to Black Widow, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman. Our issues aren't that like that's, I don't think for the people he pointed the finger at, I don't think it applied for that group of people. I think any Rotten Tomatoes certified critic that just said, I don't like that there's a gay couple in the movie, that is not a good criticism of a film. Like, that's a problem. That is, you would have to elaborate a lot more on why that is a cinematic problem with this film.
Yeah.
But yes, but we all know, if you've spent 5 minutes on Twitter or YouTube, you've seen some people come up, but I don't think as a group the Rotten Tomatoes, that's the reason the score is low. There's a couple of them in there. There's always someone that gets through. Someone says something crazy, whether they're just trying to stir controversy by saying something wild, or if they slip through the cracks and there's someone that's their grid by which they evaluate cinema. But so I would say this. I think that there's a lot of us that didn't like the film that kind of feel a little bit attacked because it's clips from Variety.
That's why I want to bring that up, because Variety. I wanted to hear that. Yep.
And then likewise, I have raised some questions about different things, and I think all kinds of isms, all of them have kind of been used as an excuse to attack people that didn't like the film, instead of addressing why it didn't connect with them. And in the case of Rotten Tomatoes critics as a group, I would think that there just isn't a history that justifies a lot of those criticisms. And I would think that also, like for me, it crosses my mind that people might get mad at me if I give a negative score to something that kind of has certain chatter around it. Yeah. I feel the pressure in the opposite direction. I don't like. I certainly, as I was like, I think I'm going to go rotten on this one. Oh no. But I also thought,
so was that something you were worried about when you?
I certainly do. I'm not. I have a people pleaser side to me, and I don't like controversy, but on some of this stuff. But I certainly crossed my mind that like if I touch on if I don't go positive on this, I bet there's going to be something. And then a week later, Variety. Well, the reason that people were negative towards this film is because it has a woman director. And I was like, and it was directed specifically, there was a discussion about the Rotten Tomato score. And so the criticism was Rotten Tomato critics were harder on this movie because a woman directed it. And we're like, I gave positive, I can list these big high profile comic book movies directed by women that I gave positive reviews to. And so it's just a lot of things like that are just, you feel attacked and feel like, you second guess should you give your honest opinion because the internet will turn on you and accuse you of being an ist or an ism, and it's not healthy for film criticism, and it doesn't help have better conversations about any of this.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree. I mean I feel like because okay, so again, a lot of my point of views on Rotten Tomatoes, I've been enlightened just because as someone, especially going through the application process and seeing what they require, and it's just kind of and here, getting on the inside and seeing what things are like behind that screen and what it's like to be in the critic community. It's a little bit different on the outside when you don't really have that perspective. So coming from that, a lot of people, including myself in the past, have been like, we viewed Rotten Tomatoes as one big collective of people that sit around a round table that say yay or nay and this, and we have this agenda and we do that. So I do appreciate you taking the time to explain some of that perspective from your point of view on the entire situation. But I do feel as a whole it takes away from the real conversations that need to be had about this film. And in terms of change, I always view it in a way where it's good simply because this controversy at the end of the day, I feel like Eternals is going to be better for it, get down the line, because a lot of people are rattled by this, whether you're a critic or a fan or someone who just didn't get it or someone who loved everything about it like I did, and you'll walk away from this in 10 years, I feel, and come back to this and be like, you know what? Eternals was really revolutionary. Eternals really did something. It really did shake up the comic book movie industry a little bit. It really did spark some conversations. And, because even now, what would we, day 4 or something like that, or day 3 in release date, and there's other stuff coming out, and we're still talking about the issues that we had about this, and just kind of breezing through some of the comments. People say they're pushing agendas, they're doing this, and everybody's going to have opinions, man. I don't think everything has an agenda. That's the point of storytelling, in my opinion, whether it's you want to get the point across. Let's say if someone's making a movie about something historically that happened, or Steven Spielberg is doing something about mass genocide, about West Africa, and he's making a film about that. The agenda in that is to raise awareness about mass genocide. So I do feel like there is an agenda, period. It's whether or not you agree with that agenda or not, and that's just a personal choice. So I will say this: I'm all for all the changes in the film. None of that bothered me, and I loved all of that because that's the world we live in today, and that's the people that we're around. And I feel like it brings a lot of joy to me when I see. I made a tweet about this when I saw one of my subscribers say, "Man, as a gay man, he loved that scene, and he loved it, especially he got to finally see himself being represented on screen and for a world that he loves." And to me, I feel like that's some of the positives that comes out of this for comic book fans, of people who have all kinds of different things going on with them, whether they have a disability like Makari, or they're maybe I actually do want to see a superhero that's on the spectrum at some point, because I know a lot of people on the spectrum. I got family on the spectrum that are huge MCU fans. And they were like, oh man, I would love to see an autistic superhero. I would love to see that too. That'd be great. I feel like that'd be great to see. So
did they do that in Power Rangers?
I'm not sure. I have no idea.
In the new movie they did,
RJ Kyler. The one with RJ Kyler and
the one from 3-4 years ago.
Naomi Scott was in that one, right? I don't know.
I think they did.
Was he?
I think one of the characters was, but to your point, more would be better.
More would be better, yeah. I mean, so I feel when we're really discussing Eternals, I feel like we got to take some of that stuff out and really look at the film as from a storytelling perspective. Did it work as a story? Does it fit the MCU from a narrative point of view? Is the acting good? Was the script good? How was the shot? Was the music good? I think that's what, if a critic can critique a film that way and review things from that point of view, I feel like we'll be all the better for it. Of course, you can insert some personal opinion. We're all people who have opinions, so that's what it is. But I feel like we need to shift that perspective, and I think it's all about perspective too. Again, you were of the perspective as, I'm going to see this movie, I know nothing about it, let's see what it is. I was of the perspective as, okay, I love these characters, let's see what they do with it. So and that's why we walked out with different opinions on that. And guys, we're gonna actually wrap up this stream in a little bit. I don't know if you have any questions for Sean or me concerning this film before we wrap this up. I did want to ask you though, your favorites in the film. Did you have anything that you really liked about this movie that was like, I would really love this?
Um, so I mean, some of my favorite characters, the Gilgamesh Thena friendship dynamic between the two of them. I thought that just worked really well as kind of this loyal friend that would be self-sacrificial. And to me, the most emotional segment of the film was his death, sacrificing for his friend and not second guessing it at all. Like, yeah, I mean, of course I would do this for my friend. So I think some of those elements are well. Some of the little subtle little elements, the Makari Druig thing that isn't even defined in the film, but you know what everything you need to know just by the way they look at each other. I like things like that. I thought were just really well done, and so much of it feels like, in theory, I like so much about the film because it's, as I mentioned when I was talking with my wife about the characters, I was prepping my video for tomorrow. There's so many great ideas. And maybe that's the problem. There are so many great ideas that when they're all kind of together, that it just didn't come together as a kind of cohesive singular. So, but like, there's a bunch of things that is like, that's a great thought. That's a great thing to put in a movie like this. And, but that's also kind of the reason it's tough for me to talk about the positives, because a lot of them felt like, oh, I wanted more of that. Oh, I wanted to see where that was going. That's kind of the tricky part on the positives for me.
Okay. Yeah, for me, a lot of the positives just stem from, I got what I wanted to see from a comic book perspective, like with Sprite and her, and her inner conflict of not being able to age and not being able to, she's just as old as all the other Eternals. She's the same age as them. Really, in the comic books, the Celestials made her just for fun. Just made, it was a he, but made him as a kid just for fun. So, and which was kind of messed up. So I loved some of the conflict and some of the things that we saw, and it's just interesting because I can go on all day just talking about all the comic book stuff and why, and justify and defend the Eternals with all my heart and soul, just as an Eternals fan, and just, but that'll just take forever, and you can't convince everybody. Every conversation you have with someone, did you like Eternals? No, I didn't. Did you read the comic books? No, I didn't. Well, did you know that Jack Kirby? You can't do that every single time. So, which is something where with certain people I'll have that conversation with.
And one of the things I've noticed in even some of the issues I had with some of the characters, or I thought that was kind of underdeveloped, as soon as someone talks about the comics, they give some sort of explanation. It was like, well, actually, there was this sort of thing, and this was like, there you go. That's okay. There is an answer to it. It's just not in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, look, which is why when I hear a criticism like that, I can't argue with it a little too much, just because I can see why that would upset people. But then on the flip side, my wife, she hasn't read the comic books. When I was rereading them, and I was like, yeah, you want to know this? Do you want to know that? And she's like, no, I don't want to know anything. Don't tell me anything. I want to see how I feel coming out of this. Right. And for her, we didn't talk about it until we got home, because we have this thing whenever we go see a movie, we don't say anything to each other about it until we get home and film the video, and then we actually start to talk about it. So we don't influence each other's thoughts. And she told me, she was like, I loved it. I just loved what I saw, and I love the story. So it's just really interesting, man. Just really seeing how this affects people, and on the spectrum of just people really loved it, really hated it, thought it was okay, but it could have been better. And I thought that video that you did was actually really interesting with the audience reactions. You can actually see the difference there. You had one guy who at the end it just wasn't enough details for him. And then the other guy, I think he's your friend. I've seen him in one of your videos before, right?
Yeah.
I always like his perspective whenever he talks.
He's a comic book guy too, so he's read all the comics, and he as we were walking out of the theater, he was like speculating, like, well, based off this comic, the voice at the end could have meant this. Yeah.
That's why I love hearing his point of view, because I know he's really into that stuff too. So from some of the videos I've seen on your channel with him, so it's just really interesting. And at my so a lot of you guys don't know, shout out to my dojo, Stormcrow Dojo. My samurai dojo. Some of the guys, my training partners, they're MCU fans, varying different opinions. They haven't seen it yet, And I spoke to them about it yesterday, and I was like, after training, and I'm like, okay, what's your perspective on this? What are you trying to gain from this film? Because they were like, do you recommend this movie? I'm like, okay, but before I say yes or no, what are you trying to gain from this? Are you trying it to be like all the other MCU movies, or are you okay with a little change and challenging themes? And he was like, yeah, I'm okay with that. So I'm like, okay, well then you might like it. I can't really say yes or no. It's one of those things where you have to go for yourself,
right?
And really form your own opinion. That's the thing about it. I've been saying that since my first reaction video to this.
And that's one of the big reasons that I wanted to do that audience reacts video. When I saw a couple people there that I could feel comfortable asking them their opinions and be able to get the 4 people that I knew where I fell, and I was pretty sure I knew that some of those people were going to like it a lot more than I did. And in particular with this film, I think just different opinions is what matters. Like the fact that I didn't like it doesn't mean that you're not going to. Yeah. And the Rotten Tomatoes score, this is an example of where you can totally misread what it meant. Like as per what we talked about earlier, that 50% kind of means people are doing this with it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that it's like, it doesn't mean that it's in the middle. It means a movie that you'll probably either really like it and love that it exists or be like, that just didn't work for me. And so more so than most movies, you really need to kind of make up your own mind about it. But yeah, it's fascinating. I did a tier ranking on this weekend of the MCU films, and I asked people to like, hey, if you tag me in your tier rankings, and here's the template that I used. And so then over the last couple of days, my inbox on Instagram and Twitter has been people's tier rankings, and I'm just trying to look, where is everybody putting Eternals? Everybody has Thor: The Dark World at the bottom. Most people have, the Avengers movies, Winter Soldier way up top, and Eternals, it's everywhere. It's in all 5 categories. There's just no consensus, and that's interesting.
And it's weird because just like with Man of Steel, I remember the first time watching it, I was like, it's okay, because I watched it on Blu-ray the first time that I saw it. I wasn't on YouTube at the time. I wasn't doing any reviews. It was just I was actually still in high school, and I was like, let me watch this movie. I watched it, and I was like, okay, I love Superman, but I was like, okay, this is all right. But then years later, now going back to this movie, I'm like, this is one of my favorite superhero films of all time. I absolutely love it. So as time went on, it started to age like wine. Mm-hmm. So I feel like
I would totally agree. That was my same experience. Essentially,
it was. I didn't like it at first too much. I thought it was okay, but here we are, and I'm thinking I have it up there with some of my favorite superhero movies. So I feel like Eternals has the potential to be that for a lot of people who may not have liked it their first couple viewings. And maybe it'll evolve to something of that scale. And I'll say this, and then let me see. So one of the things I'm loving about it is just just seeing people say like, oh man, I thought it wasn't enough fighting, and then people say, no, I thought it was enough. The fighting scenes were great, the action scenes were great. Which, look, to me, that any scene that Makari was in doing her thing, I was like, yes. This is. I love the super speed. I love the way they did that. I love
visualized
visually beautiful. Just literally just throwing her body at Icarus, destroying the mess out of him, and I love that so much about it. Like I have this thing whenever I hear a good song or see a good scene, tears literally fall from my eye. I can't control it. It happens. So I'm in the theater, and those scenes came up, and then my eyes are watering, and I'm like, oh man, why am I crying? I love this scene way too.
What do you think?
Way too much.
We think we both watched The Flash, and so we've seen a ton of speedster stuff, and then you have her doing her thing. It was like that. This is it right here.
I literally said Quicksilver who, Barry Allen who. That's literally what I said. The first time I saw it, I said Quicksilver who. I'm like, this is amazing. So, man, yeah, especially speedster fans, I know would get a kick out of that. So in closing, I'll ask you 2 questions. So the first question will be, what are your thoughts on the current phase of the MCU? Do you think we're going in a positive direction? Do you have any hopes for it? And the second question I would have is your overall closing thoughts on the Eternals, the whole subject and everything like that. So yeah.
So on phase 4, I think it's it was pretty clearly going into phase 4 an experimental phase, where phase 3 we kind of knew what they were building towards, and it was a lot of sequels to established properties or new things that you kind of knew how it fit in. Whereas right now we're 3 movies and 4 or 5 TV shows into this, and they've laid a groundwork for a bunch of very different things. From we're looking at kind of this ground level stuff with like what is Florence Pugh and U.S. Agent, what are they getting recruited for by Elaine from Seinfeld, like very ground level human. And then we have 2 different things going on that are like big picture beyond our understanding of existence type stuff with time and celestials. And so it's like as ground level as you can get humans with maybe super soldier serum to the multiverse and the creators of the universe, and I don't know what they're building towards.
Let's not forget TVA and the whole time thing.
TVA and like there's like so many big ideas, and then we did What If, where we're actually like seeing them have a battle for the multiverse.
Yes.
Actually got What If right here with our Strange Supreme right there.
And where'd you get that from?
I got it I ordered it off Amazon.
Amazon?
Yeah, I ordered it, and it told me it was going to come out February. Like, they literally told me the pre-order was for February. I was like, all right, I guess I'll be getting this in 3 months.
Hold up.
And then a couple weeks ago, I went to Best Buy to get Guardians of the Galaxy, and they had Captain America Zombie on the shelf. And I picked it up, and I went to go check out, and they wouldn't let me buy it because it wasn't supposed to be on sale yet. And then 2 days later, this came in the mail. So I don't know exactly what that means or how you combine all that together, but like literally, I pre-ordered this for next year, and then they mailed it to me 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm seeing all the stuff that I'm seeing for anything like that is like till next. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's one right there.
They probably know you were Sean Chandler. No, we gotta get this guy.
but like
hey,
literally,
200K subscriber gift.
Woo! Thank you, Amazon. But there's so many different things that I appreciate. We're in the experimental phase. I don't think all the experiments are working. Some of them are really cool. Even like on What If, I loved the Doctor Strange episode and kind of how they tied it together at the end. A couple of in the middle, I was like, okay, of all the things you could choose, why that? And so it's I feel like it's all over like super safe bets like Black Widow, and then the most experimental MCU film we've gotten yet with Eternals. And it just feels like there's like it's tough to decide what I feel about it as a whole because it's so much in so many different directions, and I don't know where it's going, which is kind of fun, and it feels dangerous, like the early era of the MCU when it's like this whole thing was new. And then it's also like, okay, is this a sign that they're losing control and they're trying too many things and oversaturated and they've got too many things happening? Or is this awesome that we're getting She-Hulk, but we're also getting Miss Marvel, but we're also getting Guardians of the Galaxy because you get the safe stuff, but plus kind of like new things and old, like, I don't know. But as someone that loves this stuff and that talks about it for a living, I'm glad that we get a lot of it.
I'll say this, like, so I can agree a little bit on that. It's definitely confusing to me. It's like I want to. The way I see it right now is that in terms of the and man, talking about the MCU next phase can take up a whole nother hour. So let me try to.
That's true.
Let me try to keep this. So the way I'm seeing it is, I feel like for me, I'm waiting for the end result to be like, okay, now that we see where we are, now I can go back and rewatch everything now and kind of piece it together because, like you said, we do have ground level stuff, and hopefully we'll get some more information on Disney Plus Day on Friday. But we're getting some ground level stuff with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, really grounded stories, espionage, buddy cop kind of feel that we have with that movie. I mean, with that show. And then we have WandaVision, where we're exploring some psychedelical stuff, some spiritual stuff, some really deep, interesting concepts. And
while being sitcoms
at the same time. And then, you have Loki, where it makes you question your entire existence. Where you're like, okay, we have the TVA, we see Jonathan Majors Kang, and as a huge Kang fan as well. I mean, that was great, but we're seeing that. So the question I was having is like, there is no real. So I'm thinking the real threat is Kang because there's Kang, but then you have Celestials who have just as big of a presence as Kang in the comic books. So I'm really trying to figure out who they want to be their next big bad. I feel like that's the real question a lot of people have right now is it going to be Kang? Is it going to be the Celestials? Is it going to be Galactus? Sorry. Is it going to be, the X-Men? Is it going to be Doctor Doom? What are we doing? Right. So I think that's a lot of the questions I'm hearing. That's some of the questions I have with this next phase.
And it's like, so we have 3 movies plus all these TV shows, and all of them kind of end with this, whoa, what is that? Where's that going? And even looking at the slate of movies coming out over the next 2 years, it doesn't really help me understand how it ties together. Like, they're very heavy-handed in making it clear Elaine is putting a team together.
Yeah.
And very, very clear the multiverse is mixed up. Very clear that the Celestials have very strong opinions about what the Eternals did. And very clear that something big, gigantic happened with Shang-Chi and what happened with him and his powers and...
The connection with the rings and everything.
Connection with the rings. And so, like, I thought based off what they said in the trailers for Eternals, plus what happened in the third act and post-credit scenes of Shang-Chi, I thought there was going to be a little bit more of connective tissue there.
I thought so too, actually. I thought the actual end credit scene with that, because my theory at that time when I saw that, I was like, okay, maybe because in the comics there's sort of like a beacon in Jack Kirby's run of the Celestials, so maybe it's a beacon. Maybe they're calling the Celestials back, because in the comic books it was just something I loved with Arishem, and you wouldn't have known this. Most people would not have known this unless you read it up, but Arishem is the judge. Okay, he's the judge. That was a direct page out of issue 1 of Jack Kirby's run, where literally he left the Eternals and the humans on Earth and said, okay, you have like 50 years or so to prove to me that you're worth saving and keeping alive, or else I'll come back and I'll destroy all you guys. And literally that was taken right out of that. And this dude creates a massive, he doesn't even teleport, he just creates a black hole and just dips. So we have these big threats and these big questions, and man, like what are we really setting up? So definitely I thought with Shang-Chi that was going to be a direct connection into that, and it turns out it wasn't, at least as of right now. It doesn't seem to have any correlation. And I'm also questioning, as much as I love Black Knight and the Ebony Blade and that storyline, I'm questioning what they're trying to do with him, because he's more of the medieval side, fantasy side of comic books. So I'm like, what are they're setting up a lot of big stories to give us little bits and pieces as we go on. A Multiverse of Madness, I feel, is just going to leave us with a lot more questions than answers. Yeah. But
I think even like Spider-Man, like I'm guessing that they're using that one to break him off into the Sony universe.
Yes, I think so too.
I'm not sure that that's going to have a lot to do. It'll set up maybe Doctor Strange, but I think it probably won't be a big player for the MCU as a whole. It'll be very Spider-Man-y and help him join Venom and Morbius.
They're definitely trying to set up with Morbius, and we had Kraven the Hunter coming, and we have all these other really big Spider-Man characters. So it's a little sad too, because I want Tom Holland Spider-Man to go off to college and we get more mature Spider-Man. Because I feel like every time we have a new phase of Spider-Man where he can finally be an adult, we never get it. He's either excluding Tobey Maguire, where he was like post-college, like kind of still young, but I want 30s Spider-Man, man. Like I need to see Spider-Man in his 30s and living his life and working in a lab and stuff. I need to see that.
So we had a second question there. Final closing thoughts on Eternals. I think the key thing that I would want, it's a little bit tough to convey because I've been primarily negative, is that it's not coming from the perspective of being a hater or like liking the fact that I don't like the movie. Like, I don't want to apologize for not liking the movie, but that's not what I want. Like, I have all this stuff behind me because I just like nerdy stuff, and I love the MCU. I've been a fan since opening day when Iron Man came out. And I remember when they did the first trailer came out, my wife was like, "Look, they're going to do an Iron Man movie." And my wife was like, "Who's Iron Man?" I was like, "What? You know, oh, we got it." And we went to go see it, and that's set up now. 13 years of date nights with my wife going to go see MCU films. The only one I didn't see in the theater is actually Thor: The Dark World. And so I've loved these movies all along. I only want to go in and enjoy them. And if, like I just, up to this point in time, I haven't enjoyed this film. There's things I enjoy. There's ideas I like. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I just going back to that key point of, I just think it's, as they're trying to figure out what works as a movie and what works as a TV show, I think this one, with the amount of time you can give characters on a TV show, would have served this story, this set of characters, this much mythology better. Everything that you've said about the comics, I went, oh, that would have been cool. Every time you've said something, like, well, in the comics, I hear that and I go, man, right. I wish we had time to explore that. Even talking about the judge and all that.
You know what upsets you more about that too? Real quick, I don't know if anyone in your comments have told you this about the Deviants. Has anyone said anything about the Deviants to you?
I haven't had the Deviant conversation yet.
So really quickly, just to add to what you're saying with that, it might make you a little more upset. The Deviants in the comic books were very much not animals. They were created by Celestials, and they came in all shapes and all sizes. And their main gripe in the comic books was that they felt abandoned. Mm-hmm. Because they were set up to fail. They were literally set up to fail. They were set up to be food for the Celestials, and because they could multiply so fast, and they were set up to be food. And the Eternals were created to literally destroy them, which they took that and added into the movie. But there was an added level of depth in the comic books to the Eternals. I mean, to these Deviants, other than the fact that they're just CGI monsters. That was something I didn't like in the movie, but. If they went with that route, I felt like it would have made a movie so much more better. But yeah,
I mean, I felt like they had half. I guess we didn't talk about them, but I felt like they had half of an arc of like, you have this reveal that they are a pawn in this game too, and they've grown a conscience. And so in the third act, you have this moment where the key deviant comes up, lays the smackdown on Icarus. Both times I watched it, I felt the theater go, yeah! And the next thing that happens is that Athena starts hitting him, and I just felt the theater both times be like, no, I thought we were going to team up and take down Icarus. I thought you guys were going to grow and change, and then they just used the deviants for a revenge plot for Athena of getting revenge. And it was like, well, wouldn't it have been more compelling if she learned grace and forgiveness against the person that killed the person she cared about the most, and they teamed up to and it just seemed like there was something, a better version of
what's funny too is that's the most comic book accurate thing about Athena is that she does not give a darn. She's like, if you betray me, I will literally kill you. I really don't care. That's how she is. So I did appreciate that, but I do see what you're saying though, because it was like he was gone for half the movie after that, and he came back, and then so
I think that's like all the things that you said with the development was like it's like they got them to a point in developing who they were and why they existed, and then it just kind of stopped there as we were trying to come up with our plot for the third act. It was like, once again, just more time, half cooked, kind of like that phrase I keep using, is half cooked, of what, like everything you said. I went, oh yeah, right, that's exciting, but that's not what I felt in the movie. I felt frustrated.
And I honestly, I do understand that. So I mean, in my closing thoughts, we will have to wrap this up because you sir have a screener to go to.
I do,
soon, right?
I do.
Yeah,
got to eat dinner and then head out to see Encanto.
Yes, you do. So my closing thoughts on this would be: I feel like over time, as we get more details about the Eternals and more information about them, I feel like people will revisit this movie and be able to kind of piece certain things together. Because not everyone's a comic book reader. Right. Not everyone's inclined to read it. Not everyone wants to. People don't even like reading news articles or even reading comments too much. So not everyone's into that. So I feel as we get more information about this within the rules set up in the MCU, more people would revisit this hopefully within the next 5 to 10 years and be like, okay, this movie is actually pretty good. And I actually really do like it. That's my hope for the movie is that more people would love it as much as I did and find the spark within it that I did. And sound opinions on why people don't like it, I can sit there and agree and listen, because I can hear you talk about why the reasons that they didn't hit for you all day, just because I didn't see it that way.
Right.
So I just couldn't for some reason. So but definitely my overall thoughts on that is, if you haven't seen Eternals yet for some reason, you're watching this, or anything for that matter, I'm going to see Belfast this weekend. Can't wait to see that one. But form your own opinions on it, guys. Form your own opinions. I say this about everything. Form your own opinions. Critics and reviewers and YouTubers are all here to share our opinions on our platforms, as we do. But definitely form your own opinions by this, because you'll be surprised what something can do for you when you walk away from it. So,
and that's kind of why I was excited about this, is that like, I know my experience, like, I can't say I liked it when I didn't. But I want to be won over. I only have reason to want to get more out of the film, and like hearing little things about what was little details that were from the comics that kind of fleshed out details about DIDNT and the characters and everything. It makes me like, maybe I do want to see it a third time. Do a little bit more kind of research on the characters, learn a little bit more, and then kind of go in with more information, see how it fleshes it out. I think that would be. Yeah, I want to be won over.
Hey, and I'm with you. What if season 2 will have Eternals? I hope so.
I think I've heard, I don't know if that's they've said that phase 4 will be in season 2.
I did hear. I've been seeing things about it. I haven't gotten any confirmation. Maybe we'll get confirmation on Friday, because what if season 2 and everything's coming up with that. So, but yeah, guys, what would you rate the film again overall? Because overall, what was your rating on it initially?
I think on kind of like 5 out of 10. I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm at a 7. I'm at a 6.5, 7, maybe 8 for enjoyment, 7 out of just being critical. But yeah, but anyways, guys, that's it for the stream. For those who came from Sean's channel, thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate that. All of my guys, thank you for being here. If you're not on Sean's channel, please go ahead and check it out. He does really great content, rankings. He's like the king of the king of rankings on YouTube. So go check out Sean. Congratulate him on the 200K once again, brother. Congrats on that. And yeah, that's it. Where else can people find you, Sean?
If you head over to the Twitter, my username is Kirk Never Died, and I'm pretty active over on Twitter, and then on Instagram at Sean Talks About. And I'm very active in my DMs. If you DM me, I'll most likely respond to it if you have a specific question about something, or if you want to yell at me. I'd prefer if you didn't do that, but if you want to, Instagram is the best place to get a hold of me.
Are you still doing your how to be a creator thing? Are you still doing that?
Yeah. I have a side YouTube channel.
Plug that out.
Yeah, it's called Real Creators, and I'm trying to have kind of. I love to help other people have the success that I've kind of had. And so kind of a YouTube channel called Real Creators. And I've also created a course on YouTube itself called How to Grow a Nerdy YouTube Channel. And so the Real Creator channel is kind of like if you want a taste for what I'm trying to do. And then the course is like, if you're ready to dive in deep, it's like over 40 lessons and kind of everything that I know about YouTube and how to build a brand and study your analytics and kind of come up with a strategy with great ideas. That's what it's kind of all about.
Hey guys, I had maybe like 30K or something, a little over 30K when Sean created that course. I actually did take some of the lessons and I watched them, and I've applied some of his lessons to this channel, and I've seen some results. So you have my stamp of approval on my side of things. So definitely,
that's great to hear.
Yeah, no, dude, I'll obviously we can talk more about that at some other point. But yeah, it was a point where I had my mind open to different ideas, where it was like, okay, I have all these great ideas, but how do I get from here to here?
Right.
And it was for me, I've found that my weak area was planning and really like trying to figure out how to schedule myself around certain types of content that I should be posting. So guys, definitely check out Sean's course. I would recommend it. And check out his channel. And once again, congrats on 200K. Thanks for coming on the channel, man, and talking about Eternals. It was a pleasure.
It was good to have a good conversation. I've had the ones in the comment section on Twitter that are a little bit more aggressive, put it that way. And so it's just fun to have a healthy conversation with two people that had different perspectives, but we can see where the other person's coming from. So that's good.
Yep.
This is what it should be like.
This is what it should be like. This is why I invited you, because I know if I had like 2 other people I wanted to invite, but I knew if I invited them, it would have been like a 2-hour argument, and that's not what we wanted to do today.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah.
How dare you?
How dare you? Because look, I have a tendency to be very passionate about certain things, but I can also sit back and listen to people, you know, once they're making good points and everything. So, but that's good. Yeah. But once again, guys, thank you so much for coming. This will be on a re-upload for those who are asking. And yeah, Sean, enjoy your screen. Enjoy the rest of your day, man. And everyone, thanks for coming once again. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I really just ended this thing. I pressed the wrong button. End broadcast. This is what I was
like zoomed in on my it's live. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.